Hello and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. I'm reading The Wheel of Time for the first time and sharing the experience with you. This is One Good Turn, The Eye of the World, and today I'm covering Chapter 47! I guess I was a lot closer on the Gollum comparison than I had even realized. It's very much Gollum vibes. Although, in a way, he almost seems more chosen? It seems like he was specifically given responsibilities by the Dark One, in a way that Gollum may not necessarily have been, but I think functionally he seems to fill in that role. He has this degradation in a way that Gollum did. He is compelled to follow the Fellowship. We have a character who wonders at possible redemption for such a pitiful figure. Interesting. I'm very curious what kind of role Padan Fain will play in the story moving forward. I'm very curious what manner of redemption arc there will be, if there is to be one. I know Gollum has always been one of my favorite characters. I always find it so tragic. That scene in the second movie where he feels he was betrayed by Frodo and commits to hating him. You know, he was so close, he was happy, and then, if I recall correctly, the Faramir stuff happens, and, well, that's a whole other discussion. So I guess what I'm saying is I hope there's redemption for Padan Fain. And then, of course, while we're on the Lord of the Rings comparisons, I guess Lan is Aragorn. We get confirmation he is a king, sort of. But let's get into it, shall we? I don't know if it was the way the story was told or not, but admittedly I found the Padan Fain part of the chapter much more compelling and interesting than the Lan stuff. I imagine it's one of those mileage may vary things, though. Rand and the boys are restless while Moraine does her questioning. Rand is pacing and wondering how the questioning is going, what's being asked, what's being shared. Rand notices that Mat does from time to time reach for the dagger. Loyal doesn't look worried. He's studying the room, the stonework. Sometimes he closes his eyes as if to feel something. And Lord Agelmar is talking to Nynaeve and Egwene. I don't like Agelmar. I do not like how disrespectful he is to Rand and Mat and Perrin. By any stretch. It's tremendously annoying. I'm trying to see it from his perspective. He wants Moraine to bring capable soldiers with her, rather than 3 farm boys who don't seem capable of fighting, but it's like, so as a soldier I can almost get it, but surely you have enough trust in Moraine to know what's best and what needs to be done, and it just doesn't seem like very good manners. But what are manners when we're talking about the end of the world? So maybe it's that I've spent more time with Rand than Agelmar, but I'm just left with, and I don't like this guy. Especially with how friendly he gets with Nynaeve and Egwene, whom I think he still thinks are Aes Sedai. It all just leaves me with an icky feeling. Mat growls, "Blood and ashes, what's taking her so long?" Agelmar looks at him disapprovingly. And then he looks at Rand and Perrin, and there's like no improvement. It's like, what did these guys do to you? Really? I know they look young. I do. They can't look that incompetent. Boys younger than that have probably gone off to war, certainly. Lamentably. Mat's an archer, so it's not like he needs the same kind of muscles that Perrin already has because he was a blacksmith, and Rand's got the sword. Anyway. Egwene asks about Lan. "I thought he was a warder, but you call him Daishan, and talk about a golden crane banner, and so did those other men. Sometimes you sound almost as if he's a king. I remember once Moraine called him the last lord of the 7 Towers. Who is he?" And Agelmar goes into a long story, which is something I think Jordan is exceptionally fond of doing, is telling these long history stories. Sometimes it works for me, other times it doesn't. It works mostly when I'm uniquely interested, and as much as I like Lan, as I said, he's not my most interesting character. Even in Lord of the Rings, Aragorn's story is nice and all, but I was always much more interested in Sam, or Gollum, or Gimli. He says, "Lord of the Seven Towers, an ancient title, Lady Egwene. Not even the High Lords of Tyr have older, though the Queen of Andor comes close. He will not speak of it, yet the story is well known along the border. He is a king, or should have been. Alon Mandragoran, Lord of the Seven Towers, Lord of the Lakes, crownless king of the Malkieri." And it's at this time that I'm like, okay, yes, definitely Aragorn. He goes on to explain that those in Shinar call themselves bordermen, but not so long ago, technically they weren't, in the sense that north of them and of Arafel was Malkier, which I guess would have at that time been the actual border against the Waste? The Blight, rather. And Malkier was capable of holding back the Blight, at least as best they could. And of course, this is where Lan is from. He is the son of Al-Akir Mandragoran, last crowned king of the Malkieri. How did he become as he is? The beginning, perhaps, was Lane. On a dare, Lane Mandragoran, the king's brother, led his lances through the Blight to the Blasted Lands, perhaps to Shaial Ghul itself. Lane's wife, Breon, made that dare for the envy that burned her heart that Al-Akir had been razed to the ground instead of Lane. The king and Lane were as close as brothers could be, as close as twins ever after the royal Al was added to Akir's name, but jealousy racked Breon. And at this point, I feel as if I could discern where the story goes. I couldn't quite, but I felt as if I knew who the characters were, if that makes sense. I knew that Breon would be an instigator and a schemer who would cause a downfall. I imagined a rift between brothers that becomes exacerbated and ending in some sort of tragic tale. Well, of course, this is going to be a tragic story. It's the fall of Malkier. Lane was acclaimed for his deeds, and rightfully so, but not even he could outshine Al-Akir. He was man and king, such as comes once in 100 years, if that. Peace favor him and El Liana. Lane died in the Blasted Lands with most of those who followed him. Men Malkier could ill afford to lose, and Breon blamed the king, saying that Shaial Ghul itself would have fallen if Al-Akir had led the rest of the Malkieri north with her husband. That seems so unfair. It sounds to me, if I haven't misinterpreted the story, Breon encouraged Lane to take soldiers to Shaial Ghul, to march on Shaial Ghul, and then they died, and then she blamed the king, Akir, for Lane's failure. Lady, that was on you. If I've misinterpreted this story, though, folks, please do tell me. I also kind of wonder if Breon did this on purpose. For revenge, she plotted with Cowyn Gamalin, called Cowyn Fairheart, to seize the throne for her son, Isam. Now Fairheart was a hero, almost as well as loved as Al-Akir himself, and one of the great lords, but when the great lords had cast the rods for king, only two separated him from Akir, and he never forgot that two men laying a different color on the crowning stone would have set him on the throne instead. Interesting, they elected a king. In a small way, it makes me think of Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, but I don't think this is where Gurm got this from, by any stretch of the imagination. It's just where my mind went. I think possibly in part because this territory, though Asian-inspired, strikes me similar to that of the North, in some ways, with their hardiness. Between them, Cowyn and Breon moved soldiers back from the Blight to seize the Seven Towers, stripping the border fronts to bare garrisons. But Cowyn's jealousy ran deeper. Fairheart the hero, whose exploits in the Blight were sung through the borderlands, was a dark friend. That's, pretty disappointing to hear, I guess. It's never who you least expect it. But it makes sense. I'm seriously wondering if Breon is a dark friend as well. It does kind of make me wonder, as the story is told, it seems like Breon was the schemer here, but it may well have fallen more on Cowyn, though I'm sure neither hands are clean. Trollocs at this point pour into Malkier because the garrisons have been weakened. Al-Akir and Lane together might have been able to rally everyone, But with Lane's doom, everyone is shaken, and the sheer numbers overwhelms Malkier. Brienne fled with her infant son Isom and was run down by Trollocs as she rode south with him. No one knows their fate of a certainty, but it can be guessed. I can find pity only for the boy. As I always say, anytime someone's fate is unknown, I say, they're still out there. I am more likely to think that Brienne is dead than Isom. I half expect we'll meet Isom at some point in the book series. That's my prediction there. When Coin Fairheart's treachery was revealed and he was taken by young Jane Charon, already called Jane Farstrider, when Fairheart was brought to the Seven Towers in chains, the great lords called for his head on a pike. But because he had been second only to Alakir and Lane in the hearts of the people, the king faced him in single combat and slew him. Yes, this all has the sense of grandiosity to it, and biblical in a way. Especially this next part. Alakir wept when he killed Coin. Some say he wept for a friend who had given himself to the shadow, and some say for Malkier. And this was the first peal of the doom of the Seven Towers, as Aglamar puts it. Alakir and Queen Eliana have baby Lan brought to him, and I guess this is what the deal with what Minsa was about. They give the baby the sword of Malkieri kings. Seems like a dangerous gift to put directly in a baby's hands. I kid, sort of. Apparently the sword, and it's the one he uses today, was made by the Aes Sedai during the War of Power. They anoint his head with oil, naming him Daishan, and that is what people are referring to when they say a diademed battle lord, and they consecrate him as next king of the Malkieri. Oaths were sworn, and Agelmar offers his own, sort of, to stand against the shadow so long as iron is hard and stone abides, to defend the Malkieri while one drop of blood remains, to avenge what cannot be defended. I'll say it again and again, apparently, but very Aragorn. Eliana puts a locket around his neck and is given over to 20 chosen from the king's bodyguard. And that's when the king and queen lead what's left of their people to face the shadow, and die doing so. That is, I guess, officially considered to be the breaking of the Seven Towers. Malkier, or most of it, fell into Trolloc hands, and the Blight swallows it. Only 5 of the bodyguards reached Falmoran alive, every man wounded, but they had the child unharmed. From the cradle they taught him all they knew. He learned weapons as other children learned toys, and the Blight as other children their mother's garden. The oath sworn over his cradle is graven in his mind. There's nothing left to defend, but he can avenge. He denies his title, yet in the borderlands he is called the Uncrowned, and if ever he raised the golden crane of Malkier, an army would come to follow. But he will not lead men to their deaths. In the Blight he courts death as a suitor courts a maiden, but he will not lead others to it. Much goodness about him. I'm curious what led him to become a warder. That's something that isn't brought up in this chapter, at least not that I can recall off the top of my head. It is nice. As much as I don't have a tremendous interest in this particular storyline, it is good to get to know Lan a bit more. We still need to know a lot about Moraine. Agelmar goes on to say, there's no man better than Lan to guide you through the Blight. He's the best of the best. And then we get the line, you might as well leave these boys here to gain a little seasoning and put your entire trust in Lan. The Blight is no place for untried boys. You know what bothers me about this disrespect? It's like it's like a person who's rude to the help, or a person who is rude to the front desk person, or who will say something rude to some random person right before an interview, and then he goes in for the interview and suddenly it's the person he made that rude comment to. It bothers me. Matt opens his mouth but shuts it again. Nynaeve and Egwene are listening intently, and Moraine shows back up. We get the line, "What did he say?" Rand demanded. And Agelmar calls him a country oaf. He's just a dick. He is a dick. Then Agelmar asks if she learned anything. Moraine says, "He is mad, or close to it, but there is nothing simple about Padden Fane." She had apparently ordered a servant to get some soap and water and so on, and she asks Agelmar's pardon for doing so, but he responds with, "My servants are yours to command." And she starts cleaning herself. She goes on, "I said he was worse than vile, but I did not come close. I do not believe I have ever met someone so abject and debased, yet at the same time so foul. I feel soiled from touching him, and I do not mean for the filth of his skin. Soiled in here." She touched her breast. "The degradation of his soul almost makes me doubt he has one. There is something worse to him than a dark friend." Man, what a dressing down. But hey, as I mentioned with the Gollum comparison, what better redemption arc can there be but then for one who starts at the lowest possible point? So good. Egwene laments, "He looked so pitiful. I remember him arriving in Emond's Field each spring, always laughing and full of news from outside. Surely there's some hope for him. No man can stand in the shadow so long that he cannot find the light again." Very much see what Jordan's doing here, and optimistic and hopeful. Moraine responds, "I have always believed it so. Perhaps Padden Fane can be redeemed, but he has been a dark friend more than 40 years, and what he has done for that, in blood and pain and death, would freeze your heart to hear. Among the least of these, though not small to you, I suspect, he brought the Trollocs to Emond's Field." Quite a bit to unpack there. 40 years is quite a long time. She does not reject out of hand the possibility of redemption, but it is noteworthy to me that Egwene's the one that brought it up, not her. I don't even necessarily know throughout all of this if Moraine really has any interest in making any sort of attempt to do so. Uncertain if it would even be worth it. And then, of course, the revelation that he is the one responsible. It certainly didn't occur to me that he might be, even though it felt so obvious that he's the one that Rand should not have spoken to way, way back in Baerlon. I think it was Baerlon. It didn't occur to me that he would have been a dark friend prior to that. I mean, I guess I just kind of assumed he became a dark friend after that point. I figured it was something innocuous, like, "Hey, Dark One, I know you want this information. I have this information. Give me a bit of money, I'll tell you." Kind of a situation. Nevertheless, I guess this was much more sinister. Rand says, "Yes," and thinks, "I should have guessed. Burn me, I should have as soon as I recognized him." I also note that Rand doesn't think about the exchange in Baerlon, and at no point does Moraine bring it up. I want to know if he's told Moraine. I can only assume he told Moraine. I guess it's thoughtful of her not to mention it to the group then. Would be embarrassing for Rand, or at the end of the day, maybe it just doesn't matter. "Did he bring any here?" Matt asked. Agelmar laughs. "If he did, they'll break their teeth on the walls of Faldara. Many others have before." I suspect Agelmar is either overconfident or underestimating Padden Fane. As pitiful as he seems, I don't think he is correctly weighing the danger of the situation or just how important the Emond's Fielders are. I mean, it's clear from how denigrating he's being, but I would have hoped he'd at least be smart enough to sense how much importance Moraine seems to be placing on them, but he really doesn't. Egwene asks why Master Fane did what he did, and Moraine says, 3 years ago. 3 years this summer, as far back as that. The light surely favors us, else the father of lies would have triumphed while I still sat planning in Tar Valon. 3 years Fane has been hunting you for the Dark One. I mean, that alone should indicate the importance of the Emond's Fielders to Agelmar. Like, it should be clear, they're not being brought along because they're soldiers, they're being brought along because the Dark One wants them. Guys, I don't like Agelmar. Okay, continuing. Rand says, "That's crazy. He's come into the Two Rivers every spring as regular as a clock. 3 years? We've been right there in front of him, and he's never looked at any of us twice before last year." "Fane told me everything, Rand. Or almost everything. I believe he managed to hold back something. Something important, despite all I could do, but he said enough. I do kind of wonder, considering what I said before, if he held back the Rand exchange, but it's like, why? Of all things he could hold back, why that? So I suspect not. 3 years ago, a half-man came for him in a town in Mirandi. Fane was terrified, of course, but it is considered a very great honor among Dark Friends to be so summoned. Fane believed he had been chosen for great things, and he had, though not in the manner he believed. He was brought north to the Blight, to the Blasted Lands, to Shayal Ghul, where he met a man with eyes of fire who named himself Baal-Zaman. Moraine goes on to explain that whatever happened to him there, he did not like it. He screams of fire and burning. It nearly killed him. It brings to mind the story of what happened to Gollum as he's being tortured for the whereabouts of the ring. Although naturally the circumstances are slightly off between this scene and that. Moraine calls him a shattered ruin, despite her healing ability. It will take a lot to make him whole, but she will make an effort, if for no other reason than to learn what it is that he's still hiding. And she explains he had been chosen because of his peddling, specifically where he did it, not just the 2 rivers. The Dark One knew roughly the area in which whatever it is he's seeking could be found. And frankly, Moraine is still not saying specifically what that is. So we don't even know if she knows or not, though I suspect she does. Fane said he has been made the Dark One's hound, and in a way he is right. The Father of Lies set Fane to hunt first, changing him so he could carry out that hunt. It is the things done to bring about those changes that Fane fears to remember. He hates his master for them as much as he fears him. So Fane was sent sniffing and hunting through all the villages around Bear Lawn, and all the way to the Mountains of Mist, and down to the Terran, and across into the 2 rivers. And it's this change that almost imitates Gollum's attraction to the ring, his attraction to the Emond's Fielders. 3 springs ago, Perrin said slowly. I remember that spring. Fane came later than usual, but what was strange was that he lingered on. A whole week he remained, idle and gnashing his teeth about laying out money for a room to the Winespring Inn. Fane likes his money. And Matt remembers that happening, and how strange it was. They guessed that maybe he had fallen for someone, a local woman. Moraine continues, after that, Fane was taken to Shayal Ghul again, and his mind was distilled. And it's kind of visceral, talking about what that distillation entailed. It was concentrated and fed back. I imagine it was not a pleasant experience. And at this point, the Dark One is confident that the 3 he seeks are in Emond's Field. It's disconcerting to the group that they had been hunted for 3 years. Moraine speaks over Matt. When Fane returned to Lugard, Baal-Zaman came to him in a dream. Fane abased himself and performed rites that would strike you deaf to hear the half of them, binding himself even more tightly to the Dark One. What is done in dreams can be more dangerous than what is done awake. That's a very concerning line for the 3 who have dreams. He was promised great rewards, power over kingdoms after Baal-Zaman's victory, and told that when he returned to Emond's Field, he was to mark the 3 he had found. A half-man would be waiting for him with Trollocs. We know now how the Trollocs came to the 2 rivers, and this is where Moraine tells Agelmar about the Waygates, and I am so glad we finally got that. It was not forgotten. Good. Moraine goes on to explain that Fane would follow them into the grave if he must, and basically, the Trollocs and Myrddraal that attacked Emond's Field did not treat Fane with any amount of dignity or respect that a man who is so important and chosen by the Dark One should be treated. He's, roped up. He was basically half a prisoner himself. Moraine's distraction to help get them away, which led the Trollocs and the Myrddraal in the wrong direction. Fane was like, you're going the wrong way. They're this other way. Come on. And none of them would listen to Fane. There's a great segment. Fane claims it was Baal-Zaman himself who drove the Myrddraal. And Agelmar says, the Dark One? Ha! The man's lying or mad. If Heartsbane were loose, we'd all of us be dead by now, or worse. Fane spoke the truth as he saw it. He could not lie to me, though he hid much. His words, but Alzamon appeared like a flickering candle flame, vanishing and reappearing, never in the same place twice. His eyes seared the Murdral, and the fires of his mouth scourged us. And Lan adds that something forced the four Fades to follow them into Shadar Logoth, so they're not ruling out the possibility that it may well have been the Dark One, which is immensely disconcerting, and I'm hoping, one would hope, rather, that that would communicate to Agelmar how important these three boys are, even if it's not directly stated yet to him. It was evil against evil in the ruins of Shadar Logoth, foul fighting vile. Trollocs were slain and consumed by Mashadar, including one that held his leash. Again, they were not treating Fane with any sort of dignity. Fane believed he was free at last. He intended to run until Baalzamon could never find him again, to the ends of Earth if necessary. Yeah, look, ruling by fear is all well and good, but if you're going to give such an important job to one of your servants and promise riches and wealth, one would imagine making the job a bit more pleasant would yield better results. I mean, I guess he is, for all intents and purposes, the devil, so he may not be capable of understanding that, but who knows? Anyway, it is important to note that Fane does in fact try to run. He was not treated well at all. So maybe there is hope for redemption there. But the longer he tried to avoid his task, the worse this compulsion becomes to complete it. Imagine his horror when he discovered that the compulsion to hunt did not lessen. Instead, it grew stronger and sharper with every day that passed. He could not eat except what he could scavenge while he hunted you, beetles and lizards snatched while he ran. And this marks his degradation from reasonably respectable peddler to golem. By the time he reached Camelin, he could feel his quarry, even when it was a mile away. And at this point, I'm like, oh, so we're just skipping over Baerlon. Okay. Although, admittedly, I should have had that thought after we passed Shadar Logoth. Nevertheless, that's when it clicked in my mind. Here in the cells below, he would sometimes look up without realizing what he was doing. He was looking in the direction of this room. Rand had a sudden itch between his shoulder blades. It was as if he could feel Fane's eyes on him then, through the intervening stone. That's a bit disconcerting. More than a bit, to be honest. Moraine goes on to explain how aggravating it was for Fane to find out that the group had split up. Man, imagine if it weren't 2 and 1, but 1 and 1 and 1. So he was torn between needing to stay with the 2 and needing to hunt the 3rd, but being unable to leave the 2. I would almost feel bad for him, except I don't. It's explained that Fane did in fact follow them through the ways. The Dark One seems to have personally given him the knowledge of how to do that. Egwene asks how he escaped the Black Wind, which is an extremely disconcerting passage. He escaped, and he did not. The Black Wind caught him, and he claimed to understand the voices. Some greeted him as like to them, others feared him. No sooner did the wind envelop Fane than it fled. Understood him and feared him? Ooh, what does that mean? What does that say about the Black Wind? Moraine goes on. There is much yet hidden about Padan Fane. Much I must learn. The evil goes deeper in him and stronger than in any man I have yet seen. It may be that the Dark One, in doing what he did to Fane, impressed some part of himself on the man, perhaps even unknowing some part of his intent. When I mentioned the Eye of the World, Fane clamped his jaws shut, but I felt something knowing behind the silence. If only I had the time, but we cannot wait. Which brings up the question of, are they going to bring Padan Fane along? It sounds like it might be difficult to find the Green Man with someone of ill intent with, but if it's that important that she learn what Padan Fane has to share, they may not have a choice. I kind of have a feeling that he might escape captivity. Or, frankly, because I don't like Agelmar, that Agelmar will probably make a deal with the Dark One to avoid the Blight, which will of course backfire and bring on the Blight. Agelmar is confident he can get information out of Fane and begs them to stay a couple of days, but Moraine is like, nah, if we could leave right now, we would, but we need to sleep. And she impresses upon Agelmar exactly how important it is that they get to their goal. The seals on Shai Al Ghul are weakening desperately, Lord Agelmar. There is no time. So hopefully Agelmar will stop being an asshole. We'll see how that goes in a paragraph. Agelmar explains, duty takes men where it will, as surely as does the pattern, and neither promises that what we do will have greatness, but our skirmish will be useless, even should we win, if you lose the battle. If you say your party must be small, I say well and good, but I beg you to make every effort to see that you can win. Leave these young men here, Aes Sedai. I swear to you that I can find 3 experienced men, with no thought of glory in their heads to replace them. And it goes on. And at this point, I'm just like, I'm sorry. 1, are you saying you don't trust Moraine? 2, you really think Moraine would... I'm sorry. Even imagining it from his POV, I just don't see it. Moraine says she has to bring them. They are the ones who will fight the battle at the Eye of the World. Agelmar's jaw dropped and he stared at Rand and Mat and Perrin. Suddenly, the Lord of Faldara took a step back, his hand groping unconsciously for the sword he never wore inside the fortress. They aren't... You are not Red Aja, Moraine Sedai, but surely not even you would... And we get a little bit of understanding, I guess. His expectation that it would be the women doing true powery stuff at the Eye of the World, not the men. And what other reason would men go but to be the sword arms? It is just like completely over his head that men would use the power. So this also in a way communicates to us that whatever's going to happen, someone's going to have to use the power. I still think he's an asshole. For all reasons previously listed. Moraine says, they are Ta'veren. And I'm pretty sure Loyal said that earlier to him as well. So it's like, Agelmar, you've heard this. The pattern weaves itself around them. Already the Dark One has tried to kill each of them more than once. 3 Ta'veren in one place are enough to change the life around them as surely as a whirlpool changes the path of a straw. When the place is the Eye of the World, the pattern might weave even the Father of Lies into itself and make him harmless again. At this point, I'm starting to imagine what things will be like moving forward, and I'm wondering if the Eye of the World is a reality rewriting situation. Because there's talk about men who want glory as being unacceptable to approach this place. So maybe it's like a wish-granting type situation, and it requires the 3 of them to wish for goodness, for lack of a more all-encompassing, nuanced description. And I imagine picking up in the next book these 3 with radically different existences or lives. I imagine Rand wishing for home, and he's at home. I imagine Mat wishing for whatever it is that Mat may or may not wish for. I don't want to say glory because it's been so clear that that's, not the thing to wish for, but dagger influence. And I imagine Perrin wishing either for a steading, something vaguely wolfish, hard to say. And then maybe we'll pick up in the future book with each of them in their own different lives. Or maybe they'll just all wish for home and things will go back to normal, seemingly. Hard to say. Moraine explains that they are the blood of Manna Therin. The old blood of Manna Therin is strong and pure in almost all these young men. Can you doubt the strength of Manna Therin's blood, Lord Agelmar? Rand clocks the almost all, and he looks at Nynaeve, who didn't say anything, and he wonders what Moraine knows. Agelmar finally says, the wheel brings strange times. Farm boys carry the honor of Manna Therin into the Blight. Yet if any blood can strike a fell blow at the Dark One, it would be the blood of Manna Therin. And so they retire to their rooms for the night. Things are picking up. I'm very eager at this point to be finishing the book. I feel like we're headed towards a cliffhanger, which makes sense. Hi everyone, Editor Dorcas here, to wonder if perhaps I went too hard on Agelmar. I don't like him. I sat with this chapter for a bit and asked myself, did I really take any time to consider it from his perspective? He is a soldier's soldier, I guess. He is a man of war, and perhaps his tactlessness is just sort of a rough necessity of his position. Not to mention, I guess I probably did understate the sheer impossibility bringing these men along to use the power. I also, listening back as I'm editing this, acknowledge how attached I am to the main crew, to the Fellowship, the Emmons Fielders, so I hear myself becoming so defensive on their behalf and everything that they've been through. A part of me, I think, doesn't feel hyper-connected to this war story. It feels a little bit like it's been added so late in the game that I don't have any unique investment in it, which could also be playing a part. Clearly, they're in a dire situation, but there just hasn't been that much time spent here. And it in a small way, it feels kind of like a pit stop for where the actual story is. Does that make sense? Anyway, those are just some hindsight thoughts. Thanks so much. I think that's all I got for now. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.